Hold on to your lettuce and put on your finest clothes. Not that one, because we have the latest episode of Watchmen and Think Story is here to break it all down. So let's not waste any of your time and get right into it. We begin in World War I Germany, where a typist by the name of Fraulein Muller is called to dictate a propaganda flyer for a German commander. Keep a mental note of that last name as it will come into play later on in the episode. She's typing up the same flyer we saw the father write "Watch over this boy" on in episode 1. The flyer itself is a scathing portrayal of how African American soldiers were treated at home, and offers these soldiers help if they were to defect. It's based off real flyers that the Germans dropped to destroy the morale of African American troops. I'm just glad none of them left because World War II would have really sucked. Here we see a German plane tossing the flyers over the all-African-American company, and the father from episode 1, who now has a name on IMDb as O.B. Williams, picking one up. So this event here takes place between 1917 and 1918, 3 years before the Tulsa Massacre of 1921. For whatever reason, O.B. has decided to hang on to this piece of paper. This link between Germany and the United States will likely deepen as the show goes on, since both Dr. Manhattan and Ozymandias' parents emigrated to the US from Germany. The little boy from episode 1 tries on his father's uniform and finds the flyer as we transition to the same man now roughly 100 years later. He's still holding on to that flyer, which shows signs of age just like himself. We're picking up right at the end of episode 1 with the arrival of Angela having seen Judd hung by the tree. But how did this man possibly lift a body over 200 pounds?
You think I can lift 200 pounds?
Angela brings Will, our wheelchair man, to the back of her bakery where she cuffs him and transforms into Sister Night, giving herself a moment to vent about the death of her friend Judd. She finds a bottle of pills and the flyer on him. Now I can't help but notice his purple vest, a very intriguing color choice considering we saw Ozymandias last episode wear purple and also receive a purple cake. I can't help but think there's a connection between these two characters. If you watch my episode 1 breakdown, I theorize that time travel or traveling between dimensions will likely play a role in this series, and I think Will here is somehow able to do this. Perhaps it was a younger version of himself who killed Judd, so he wouldn't be lying when he said he was the one to string him up. He also talks about these pills, which he says are for his memory, and that it's been a long time since he's been home. When he's referring to a long time, I think he could quite literally be meaning the word time. He tells Angela that there is a vast conspiracy that Judd was involved with, and that he'll give her parts of it piece by piece. Her pager goes off and she calls the number to find out what she already knows, that Judd is dead. She takes with her Will's coffee mug to hold on as DNA evidence. In the early morning at the newspaper stand, yes, there is no internet in this world, most people still get their news from papers, we get a bunch of little snippets of information about what's going on in the world. The sign here mentions squids drop on 4 cities, like we saw happen in Tulsa in episode 1, and the delivery man suggests interdimensionality as the cause. As I suggested in episode 1, the squid probably have something to do with the giant interdimensional squid Ozymandias unleashed in New York and later blamed Dr. Manhattan for. We see a copy of the New Frontiersman, a far-right leaning publication, and the Tulsa Sun, which announces Keene's running for president in an attempt to oust President Redford. We heard about this last episode over the radio before Judd meets his untimely demise. This is Senator Joe Keene's son Joe Jr., whose father was the one who tabled the infamous Keene Act, which banned costume crime fighters, save those sanctioned by the government. We're then introduced to this character named Bien. The newspaper man says that there won't be any Nova Express until the afternoon. Nova Express is basically a rival to the New Frontiersman, critical of costume adventurers as well. It is thought that Nova Express was bankrolled by one of Ozymandias' companies, and one of its journalists, Doug Roth, was the first to see a connection between Dr. Manhattan and his co-workers getting cancer. Bien is picking up a bunch of papers for a yet unknown character who apparently reads all of them. Angela arrives at the crime scene and is informed by Looking Glass that Judd's car was found not too far away with its tires blown. The cause of his death? Asphyxiation. But how could a 105-year-old man who can't even get himself into a car do this? Also, Looking-Glass pulls up his mask and eats nuts, just like Rorschach would pull up his and eat beans. He even begins to interrogate Angela about where she was last night and takes a jab about her kids not really being her own kids. But before we can get any further, a member of the paparazzi crash lands on their car. These journalistic scum are known as moths, but instead of being drawn to a flame, they're drawn to a news story. Red Scare smashes the moth's camera and asks Angela who's in charge. With Judd gone, who will become the new head of the Tulsa PD is still yet to be known. We flash back to Christmas several years ago where Calvin seems to have a present for Angela.
It's my dick in a box.
You can tell by the small amount of presents under the tree this is before the Abars have taken in Topher and the other kids into their home. In fact, this is the White Night, a night mentioned briefly in the last episode where dozens of officers were systematically killed in a coordinated attack, resulting in the adoption of the Keene Act and Angela's eventual resignation, forcing her to take her crime-fighting ways underground. What I find most interesting about this scene is that we never see how Angela is saved, nor what happened to Judd, who we see has also survived the White Night. And with Angela later finding a clan robe in Judd's house, there's definitely something larger at play here. It's here we learn that Angela's partner, Doyle, and his wife were killed in the attack, leaving his 3 children without a home. This is how Angela and Cal come to take in Topher and his sisters, with Judd becoming a uncle figure to them. As Topher says to Angela later on, Judd isn't his real uncle. Judd also brings up the fact that Angela rarely cries. We also see this when she finds Judd's dead body. Instead of crying, she internalizes the pain and unleashes it through violence, like when she beats the crap out of one of Nixonville's residents. Believing the residents of Nixonville to have some sort of hand in Judd's death, they raid the trailer park. My guess is that we'll see one of these residents in the next episode. In episode 1, we got a brief mention of Reparations, and here outside the Greenwood Center for Cultural Heritage, we get a little bit more info about what exactly these reparations are. When Angela approaches one of these kiosks, she's greeted by Henry Louis Gates Jr., who is a real-life African-American scholar and professor at Harvard University. In this universe, he's now Treasurer of the United States, and by giving a sample of your DNA, you can find out if you're eligible for compensation under the Victims of Racial Violence Act. The white protesters outside don't see this as fair. Their signs read, "Equal rights equals equal taxes," and "You got a sorry, now want a handout." With many of the white townspeople living in a trailer park, these reparations have caused resentment and brought out deep-rooted racism. Angela comes home to find this man, simply known as Andy, on her doorstep demanding to see the kids. By my best guess, this is a relative, perhaps father, of Angela's former partner Doyle or his wife. He doesn't really care about seeing the kids and is easily shooed away when Angela offers him money. Angela knows she has to break the news to Topher that Judd is passed. Notice the Magna-Hatton blocks he's playing with here, which are held afloat by the power of magnets. A magnet which we'll later see used to pick up old Will in his car. Notice also this structure he's building, the same one we see Dr. Manhattan create on Mars, and one which looks eerily similar to Ozymandias' castle. Topher is allowed to watch American Hero Story, the big television event advertised on planes and buses in episode 1. And after the longest intro warning I've ever seen, juxtaposed to the creation of a suicide vest by the cavalry, we're given the introduction of Rolf Muller, his body washed ashore along the Boston River. First, Rolf has this same last name as the typist from the introduction. A circus strongman from East Germany, he emigrated to the US and joined the circus, and it was believed that he was a serial killer of children. Implied in the narration, Muller faked his own death so he could become something new: Hooded Justice. It was a way for him to release all of his pent-up rage, much like how Angela's sister Knight is her way to take out her rage. But more interesting are the connections between Muller and Judd. Notice how both men have one shoe missing from their dead bodies. Combine that with Muller saying he faked his own death, could the same be said for Judd? Later on in the episode, Ozymandias talks about how they could have a use for Philip's corpse, and earlier Will talks about Dr. Manhattan's ability to change skin color and create clones of himself. We already know Ozymandias has clones of his servants. Is it possible that the Judd hanging from this tree isn't Judd at all, rather Judd or someone else wanting us to think that he is? We get this flashback in 1938, focusing on Orson Welles' fake alien invasion radiocast War of the Worlds. Just like like Rolf's body was a hoax, so too does this scene start with one, before introducing us to Rolf's alter ego, Hooded Justice, believed to be the first masked Avenger and a charter member of the Minutemen. Angela brings roses over to a mourning Jane, who is alongside Senator Joe Keene Jr. Jane used to work with Joe, and there's this weird line Joe says where he tells Angela that she can have all the resources she needs to find whoever did this to Judd, insinuating that he knows she's a crime fighter. She even has to reiterate that she's retired. Senator Joe is running in direct opposition to President Redford, a man seen as being very far left on the political spectrum. With Angela later finding a Klan robe in Judd's closet, I can't help but think there's some more nefarious relationship between Senator Keene and the Crawfords. Angela fakes being sick to gain entry into Judd's room, where she takes out these nifty x-ray glasses. It's there she finds this picture of what I think is Judd and his father, before stumbling on some Klan robes behind his secret door. Angela will later confront Will about these robes, saying that it was a setup. The Judd she knows has been nothing but compassionate. There's no way he's some sort of secret racist. We're back with Ozymandias a year after the events in episode 1, judging by the now 2-year anniversary cake scene here. An anniversary for what we still don't know. I've already theorized that the events here take place in a different time or dimension, and the evidence supporting this continues to grow. For example, Ozymandias eats a tomato off this big tree, similar to that of an apple tree, when tomatoes in our world grow off vines. It's also possible that he had them genetically changed. This episode also draws a few comparisons between Ozymandias and Alexander the Great. Not only is Ozzy's middle name Alexander, but his horse Bucephalus is the same name of Alexander's horse. During the play, Ozzy makes reference to the impenetrable Gordian knot, which Alexander cut loose. Alexander was also Ozymandias' childhood hero, so it looks like Ozymandias has something he wants to conquer. The world, time, interdimensional travel, we'll need to keep tuning in to find out. Ozymandias has finally finished his play and has his servants perform it. Notice the banner in the background which reads Gila Flats 1959, which is the time and location when Joe Osterman became Dr. Manhattan. This play is a recreation of that event in which Ozymandias' servant Phillips is literally killed and replaced by someone new. These servants, to the best of what we know so far, are clones of one another, and Ozymandias has apparently gone through several of them, telling the new Phillips to put the body away with the others. Old Man Will has somehow gotten out of his cuffs when Angela arrives to check on him. You may have missed it, but Will also moves his hands along here almost as if he's conducting the music, which ends Ozymandias' previous scene, almost hinting at some connection between the two. After all, Will says if he were to get arrested, he wouldn't be held long.
I've got friends in higher places.
Angela receives a call that the DNA is eligible for reparations and that it's connected with her own. Will is her grandfather, a fact Will already knows. She decides to arrest him and helps him into her car when suddenly a giant magnet comes out from out of the sky and scoops him up, leaving her with only the flyer from 1921. But who took him? My best guess is someone with a lot of money, likely Ozymandias, or a much smaller chance whoever Bien is working for who we haven't met yet. This episode seems to have created more questions than answers, but I wouldn't expect anything less than someone who wrote on Lost. I hope you'll like and subscribe and join me every week as we break down the secrets to HBO's Watchmen. Let me know about what you thought about the episode below, and feel free to follow me on Twitter at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember, Daddy loves you very much.